welcome to this episode of the Zoom Room Sessions as part of our Thrive and Try project. I'm David Francis Moore, and this is my colleague,
Juliet Harvey.
Today we are joined by Úna Molloy. Úna Molloy is the founder of Turning Pirate. She's a music agent, and she's also the programmer of Lost Lane Music Venue in Dublin, and has and still works with some of Ireland's leading musical talent, including Lisa Hannigan, Paul Noonan, Vagabonds, Wallis Bird, and so on and so forth. Úna Molloy, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me. It's an honour to be asked. I have a very tiny amount of Gaelga, but yeah, it'll take me 2 weeks in the Gaeltacht to fully revive it to the standard that I'd be able to answer that question. But yeah, so I mean, with my arts profession, I started off working as a tour manager and a production manager, and I spent a lot of time touring overseas. But it was kind of in my early 20s, and I knew that I wanted to settle down and have kids when I found all the correct ingredients to do that. And so I just knew that I knew that I had to have a plan for when I came off the road. So while I was doing that, I set up an agency and started booking tours. And through that agency, I spent a lot of you have a lot of artists that get to a point that they're big, and then they go overseas and they tour bigger venues and bigger tours overseas, and then they come back and they do their date in Cork and their date in Dublin. And I always felt that there was a lot of value to being able to be on the road in Ireland and do, with Lisa Hannigan, when she first went solo, we did a 32-date tour in Ireland with 6-piece band and 3 cars and driving around, and it was just a really nice way to set up a solo career. But also it was I just think there's a lot of value to that sense of ownership that people have, where you keep coming and playing their town and keep playing their, plus it's loads of fun and it's a great way to earn money. So it's a good I think it's important for artists to be able to jump in their car and play in Ireland and pay off their credit card bill no matter what happens, so there's loads of different facets to it, but that then just kind of became a thing. It started to be a thing that I focused on then. So when I was on tour, I would just program shows for slightly bigger acts to do, tours for bigger acts to do, lots of small towns in Ireland. And so that's kind of, I don't really have, it's funny because David was laughing about the lengthy intro, because I've always done about 3 or 4 things when it comes to the music industry in Ireland. Producing shows. We produce collaborative shows called the MixTape shows that we do all over the country. We do a New Year's Eve one in Baker Street every year. This year would have been our 10th year anniversary. So yeah, it's really, I mean, in terms of what my job is in the industry, I think it's whatever is needed to be done, really, at a certain time, but mostly agency and tour production. Funny you asked that. For a long time, I remember when I was really young, I did an IMRO panel, and it was with grown-up music industry people, and one of them was a big guy in MCG, and the other was he was like a lawyer in the UK. And I remember at the time they sort of laughed at how there was no need for an Irish agent, because you get to a certain level and then you go over and you have a UK agent, and then you sort of disappear off into that world. And I remember, when you have conversations in your head after the fact, where you're like, hang on a second. And I remember being kind of, that's not, I didn't really have the maturity or maybe the experience to explain that, not everybody is playing Croke Park. So actually, and people who are at a panel in IMRO are probably more likely to need an Irish agent than the people who are your clients' fancy UK lawyer. So I feel really proud to call myself an Irish agent. It took me a little while though, because I remember thinking, oh, I'm just an agent for smaller acts, whereas actually that's not what I do. So I feel good to be able to say it now, but it did take a while. I think that it's funny. I think that in the Irish music industry, it's like everybody kind of has to muck in and do a few different things, as in, you can't just be a PR person really, or you can't just be a manager, or you kind of have to muck in and take out the dishes and help with the other stuff, because it's small and people really I would say that, when I took on Vagabonds first, they have an amazing manager now, but when I took on Vagabonds first, it was always we'll work on this as a kind of a project, and I'll project manage it. And then when needs must, we'll get a manager who can really focus on your career. So it's, I suppose the thing about that, people think that being an Irish agent seems like something that's kind of small time or whatever, but it actually, for me with my 3-year-old and wanting to stay at home and not be on the road, it's a really nice mix with all the other things that I do, and I can pick, I've gotten to a point now where if, I don't like working with somebody, I don't have to work with them anymore, or, I've kind of earned my stripes and done those things. So, I'm not going to be, throwing TVs out hotel rooms anytime soon, but, it keeps me going. And I'm really happy with it. And so I suppose over time, I realized that I was an agent, and that was important. But I can't pinpoint a moment. So. No. Well, I was really lucky in that it all kind of happened quite organically for me, in that I was in college in Dunleary Institute of Art, Design and Technology, and I was working in Whelan's behind the bar, paying for college and paying for not going to college as well, and just generally, and I was friends with the ENS officer in my college, and he suggested that I would run for entertainment officer, and he kind of said he'd help me run the campaign and all that. So I ran and I got elected, and then from there I just kind of stayed, working in Whelan's, and the whole process just organically happened into, I started booking shows and I started meeting musicians, and then when Lisa, so from there I think I started booking tours, because I would be in Whelan's and all of the music, so if Guggy in Galway was in Dublin, he'd pop into Whelan's, we'd hang out, and there's this kind of community that you get to know, and I'm trying to remember your original question.
So it was the what motivates your work, and
yeah,
that's a beautiful way of explaining it.
Yeah.
How it started.
But and actually that motivation with meeting, so you book the tour, and then I was really lucky in that most of the time you book a show and then the artist goes and does the show, whereas I think the first tour I did was David Kitt, and he asked if I would tour manage as well, and I was like, sure, I'll tour manage. Sounds like great fun, and then it just then it was really amazing, because all of the people that I booked shows with and all the different venues that I was building a relationship with, I was suddenly then, have at the show and having a pint after the gig and having a chat and getting to know people. And that was when I was like 22, so suddenly you realize that there's a really, or like a beautiful independent world in Ireland, that as much as there's the bigger promoters that it's important to have, and there's bigger venues that it's important to have, there's a really beautiful community of independent venues that work really hard to sustain, the artistic life of, the music world, and lots of other parts of it. It's not, and if anything, with the COVID-19 thing, you kind of really realize that it's not just the musicians, it's the sound engineers and the people who do the box office, and there are all these people that just depend on people being able to gather and do a live gig and have fun together in a room, you know. So my motivation, I would say, is just that I was really drawn to that world, and still am really drawn to that world. And it was really nice to then be outside, you know, be on tour. We'd be on tour in Australia and Asia and America, and be able to describe that world to people, you know, from there, you know, from doing that, making lots of really amazing musical friends and ending up on other adventures, you know, like I tour managed Natalie Merchant a couple of years ago, and the only reason I said yes is because she had the same manager as David Byrne from Talking Heads, so I was just like, definitely be best friends with Talking Heads if I do this, and did this like 3-week tour with her, and it was, the first date was in the Royal Albert Hall, and they had no production manager, so I was just like, ugh. So, and that just being kind of thrown in at the deep end, because really I think with what we do, it's like, you know, you're doing a show in the Barras and you're doing a show in the Royal Albert Hall. It's the same template, it's just that it's bigger and there's more teams underneath everything you're doing. So yeah, I kind of love it. I love that world, and I love making it as intimate as possible, from a relationship point of view, I think, you know. For me, like, I mean, we do the mixtape shows in Vicar Street, as I mentioned, and they kind of culminate. Sorry, we do the mixtape shows in a lot of situations, but it kind of culminates in Vicar Street on New Year's Eve every year. And really, it's like, it's the joy, you know, like, it's people working really hard and the standard being intensely high, but also just having loads and loads of fun while you're doing it. So we, like, the show is a 5 or 6 hour show. The doors open at 8 o'clock, the show starts at 9, and there's like literally party bangers, like, just being cracked out from the stage with really big musical acts and a 12-piece band, 3 backing vocalists, 3-piece horn section, 2 keyboard players, 2 guitar players, and it's like perfect. It's really well organized, and it's not like I don't do the musical direction, but it's like, you know, I find a really good musical director who's going to do a brilliant job, and it's very there's not a lot of ego in there, and I find, maybe in answer to your question, the way I work best is just whenever you do bump into a bit of an ego, I just don't really hang around. So over time, we've sort of carved out this gang of people who are amazing musicians and crew and lead singers and bands who are just a kind of a gang, you know, and all help each other out and support each other. So like, that's one way, but then that kind of goes, you know, that goes beyond that as well, in terms of just day to day, like how, you know, with Lost Lane, I started working with those guys, and the minute I met them, I was just like, these are great guys, and they have a really good vision for what we're doing. And, you know, I think it's just about doing things that you're drawn to, as opposed to putting up with stuff that you're not like the opposite of drawn to, you know, repelled by. And it just makes for a happy life, you know. Course. And I think one of the most important things that's coming out of the COVID thing is everybody admitting that you're not in this job just for the love of it. Like, everybody wants to get paid, and, you know, everybody wants to, you know, you can be an artist and you don't have to feel guilty about wanting to make some sweet cash, you know, like, you know, you work really hard, and people deserve to make money, and the arts industry is a huge industry in Ireland that deserves support and respect. Yeah, and that's something that I think COVID has really made us all passionate about, is just admitting that entrepreneurial, that whole world, the business world and the arts world, shouldn't necessarily be so separate. And I don't think artists should feel so guilty about wanting to be a part of the people who don't have to stress about paying rent every week or every month, you know. again, like it's very prevalent to the, you know, the current situation we're all in, but because there's a group called the EPIC Working Group, which is a group that's come together to lobby and campaign for support for the events industry, because I think there's a lot of people campaigning for artists, but you know, the actual industry, the people who work within the industry, EPIC Working Group, and there's another one called Event Industry Ireland, and the National Campaign for the Arts. You know, they're all working really hard, and it's something that I've kind of been obviously keeping an eye on for a number of different reasons. But it's funny, like I've had the conversations that I've had because of that, like just with regard to your question specifically, I've been enlightened as to how people don't really view it as an industry. And even, it's funny, like my husband is a big Man United fan, so so he was just like the sports, the football being, and like he's an absolute dud. You wouldn't think he was a football fan at all in terms of like, you know, like he's a big arts fan as well. But when it was announced that football was coming back, he was just like, oh my God, and it was like straight into the football apps. And I really noticed, because we've been doing a lot of driving, I've been listening to the radio a lot, where I mightn't necessarily have listened to the radio very much before. And I really noticed that all of a sudden, you know, the radio went from, you know, just the news and the chats and the music, it just went for these like huge segments about sports and what was happening with sports and when it was coming back. And I was just like, how come we don't have, you know, as in, how come the Irish industry doesn't have an arts section on the news like that we can all, you know, depend on some support from, you know, Katrina Perry going like, and now we have the arts section on 6-1, you know, as in, like, there's no reason in the world, as in they're similar in terms of the economy and what they bring in, and they're way more important in terms of just our identity and our cultural identity here in Ireland, and it's just widely respected all over the world. So yeah, I do think there needs to be a massive step up in terms of that. Well, the need to pay rent is always a good one, but I think that I mean, again, it's this COVID thing. Is I've been really excited by the phone calls I've had in the last week or so, where I'm ringing promoters and all these people that I talked about earlier, just, you know, people who run venues, and I'm asking them, you know, like, what are you up to? And it's incredible how versatile and how willing to just continue and adapt and passionate people are in terms of like coming up with ideas and how to work things and ways to so I suppose people are just so, it's different than in the business world, where it's colder and less passionate, because people are doing it because they have to for their job. Whereas I think the passion involved in the arts community, combined with the sort of want to support it and keep going, is like, it's a really potent combination of things. Pride as well, you know, it's a pride and a romanticism as well. You know, it's like, these are people who want to do well in business, are really creative, are hardworking, but they're sitting at home reading Seamus Heaney poems at night. You know, so it's like, you know, it's an amazing combination of things, I think, particularly when people have that business savviness, you know, and have to pay their mortgage and pay the rent and pay the bills. Out for me is the ethic, you know, that ethics, the ethics and morals. Like, I feel really strongly that the people that I work with and engage with have, you know, there's a lot of artists that have that are politically activated as well at the moment and working really hard. And I think that just with the world as it is now, I think having your moral compass in the right direction from a business point of view and from an arts point of view is very important. And I think that more than anything, probably that's the thing that I kind of get drawn to in terms of working with people. And it's the one thing that I find it hard to forgive or look beyond if people aren't on that. Obviously everybody has their variants of that, but like that you want to have somebody who's on the same ethical place or plane as you, I think. Planning, organising, that's a big one. I'd love to get to a point in my life where I could get somebody else to plan and organise a little bit more. But again, that's, you gotta take it on the chin. I mean, that's, I suppose, as well, just that self-awareness in terms of that whole idea of networking and being around people. And I think it's very, I think people certainly the people that I work with, I find that people are very patient and happy to deal with people from like across all different spectrums and different ways of thinking, and patience is a huge thing, and self-awareness is a huge thing. And if you kind of step outside that boundary, because people are so broadly patient, I find it's a slightly unforgivable thing, in that, like, when you're on, particularly if you're on tour, say, for example, and you're in a tight tour bus space for 3 weeks, you have to learn that kind of self-awareness and how to get on with people. I think that's very important. And I think a lot of the people in the industry the people that I've talked about in terms of venues and stuff, they're all people that you get on with them because they're easy to get on with. And maybe, I don't know whether that the industry makes them that way or whether they're that way and that they get into the industry because of that. But, it's all, there's a certain type of person. And again, the perseverance aspect, and the ability to change and deal with adverse situations. Again, it's like a certain type of person that can deal with, like with COVID, that list. It's like I can think of countless people that all fit within those categories that I work with in Ireland, which is really brilliant as well. I worked with a really amazing lady who was involved in Trinity, and she gave me a space to work in, and it was just after, it was before I got pregnant, before I got married actually, and before I got pregnant. And then so that was just this magical gift where I was able to meet people and be in town and then leave the office and go home. But yeah, then when my little fella arrived, my husband was working as an addiction counsellor with Anna Liffey Drug Project. So he was in town in this kind of intense job, and I was at home with the baby, and I would get up, he'd get up with the baby at 7:00, and I'd work for 2 hours on the computer, and then he'd go off to work, and I'd wait patiently for the baby to nap and then get another bit of work done, and then when he came home I'd work for 2 hours. So I think that's a lot of physical, mental, and digital space all in one go, where you just kind of, again, you sort of you figure out a way to make it work. And it's funny, that sense of, before I had a child, my way of working was that I would be like, let's go out and go to shows and see people and meet people for 3 days, and then I'd come home and I'd lock myself away and I'd work till 3 a.m. advancing a European tour, and just like live on coffee and toast and just get it all done all in one go. And then so the massive thing for me was like trying to change from just like being able to work for really long hours and get really stuck into something and engrossed in it, to suddenly being like, okay, the baby's napping for 20 minutes, I've got 20 minutes on, and then I have to switch off and then come back on. for the baby to nap, you know, when the baby naps for another 20 minutes. So, I mean, I guess I've worked on tour buses across America where the internet keeps coming in and out, or in hotel rooms, or, you know, I've kind of worked in all of them, in every type of space, and maybe that's been really good for me, in that I've been able to now with the baby I can adapt into whatever. Well, he's not a baby anymore, but whatever is needed, you know. At the moment, my workspace is at home, and before COVID, I was going up to Lost Lane on a Thursday, and I'd have a day, and I'd set up all my meetings, and then I'd meet friends, and I'd go and see my mom and dad on a Thursday, and then I'd come home on Friday or Saturday, and then come back and work from the office here at home. So, yeah, lots of variance there. Is where I'm at. I can be an agent and a tour manager, and I can produce shows. Whereas if I was trying to write a book, that would be really tricky. You know, as in, like, if you have something that you just really need to, like, engross yourself in order to be artistic, it's not as easy. And I've been kind of lucky in that I can, you know, book put together a European tour for Lisa, whilst booking a show in Ireland, and I can switch on and off because it's kind of methodical and it's chats, but it's not like trying to delve into my creative mind or trying to, you know, write a song or write a record. So in that sense, I've been lucky. In terms of sports, I'm not great at. I realized when I had my son that I'm not great at asking for support for things, and that's something that I've changed as well, in that being able to just be like, somebody take my child off me, I have to do a day's work, you know, and that, or like, you know, just asking for help is a big support to be able to, you know, to place a massive importance in, I think, whether it be from friends or family or your, you know, whoever it is. I think a lot of artists, one of the first things they could do is admit when times are tough, and maybe ask for help when needed. I mean, I totally understand that need to switch off, and it's that kind of, it being self-employed. It's always a tricky balance, I think, in that it's the pros and cons of being able to work everywhere, but also then your mom and dad giving out because you're on your phone all the time whenever you come to visit. You know, it's like, well, I wouldn't be able to come to visit at 2:00 on a Tuesday if I wasn't able to be on my phone. You know, it's like that thing of sort of entering into that new world of being self-employed and being able to switch off and switch on. I think that I really realized again when my son was born. You know, see this like massive realizations in my life when my poor son was born. But that idea of realizing that you have to be able to go, okay, this is my time for home, and this is my time for myself, and this is my, like, one of the things that I was really conscious of when we were on tour was you'd come back after 6 weeks on the road, and you'd really have to kind of decompress, and the band would go off and chill out, whereas you'd have to go and advance your next 5-week USA tour, you know. So I noticed during that time that one of my big things was I just had to like put on headphones and go for a big walk on my own. At the time I was like, you know, renting a house and sharing a flat and with people that I loved, but I'm actually with Lisa as well, so we were on tour and coming back, and I, you know, it was like a big thing to just have time all by yourself, because, you know, tour managing is so intense as well. So I think over time you sort of figure out your survival methods for your time, and then as you get a bit older and you get to pick and choose, and you've kind of earned your stripes, and you feel like you've arrived into your career, maybe then you get to like value your time a little bit more, and be able to say, right, every week I have to spend a couple of hours on my own, and every week I have to spend a couple of hours on my phone turned off, playing with my son, And, you know, at 7 o'clock, I just don't answer the phone for work calls anymore. And that is a beautiful place to arrive to. And that's one that I've very much arrived into, you know, in the last while, and made it very clear to people I work with that, you know, or maybe not so much in COVID, but in general in life, that I've been like, you know, I don't answer the phone after 7 o'clock unless it's an emergency. So text me if it's an emergency, otherwise I won't answer the phone. And I think that people get it, and it's a nice place to be able to be in and have chosen to be in. I mean, I don't like, it's funny, maybe the reason that it's hard, or what was hard in the past, to say that I'm a music agent is because there's not a lot of people who do what I do out there. So society doesn't really get a choice in the matter, you know, in that, like, I just kind of get on with it and do it. And I've found a really nice space where there's just a tribe of people that I, you know, sometimes have loads of work with and sometimes don't see for ages. But it's not really about society, in that, like, it's more like our little music tribe is a strong place. Like, I can't see myself, you know, being on Katrina Perry's arts section of the news anytime soon. But so in that sense, then no, society doesn't. But at the same time, that doesn't really bother me at all, in that, like, we, you know, I have my own thing going on along with the rest of the people in this tribe. So yeah, see you later, society. Like, it's just, again, it's like that if people treated arts like they treat sports, you know, and gave it that amount of respect and inclusivity and that massive a platform, you know, that platform. So maybe that's it. It's just to see it as an equal to something on that, you know, as in, like, I mean, it's been a long time since I was in any educational facilities. But I would say, I just feel it's like, you know, watching normal people and seeing seeing Connell playing the sports and everyone goes to the match and it's a big deal, and watching, you know, I don't know if you saw Spliced. Did you see that? So Spliced, it's this beautiful, it's like this guy called Timmy Creed, I think his name is, and he wrote a one-man show, and it's about sort of toxicity. Is that the word?
Toxic masculinity.
Toxic masculinity. Sorry, I shouldn't have tried to say that word. In the GAA, and it's about growing up in a small town, and being like a big GAA star, and then deciding that he wanted to go and do acting and studying acting in Oxford. But it's this beautiful, you know, it's like, it's a real, you know, when we're just what we're talking about now is like the idea of the support that the lads get in the GAA, and the difference between that and how the kind of ostracized punk band in the garage, you know, that are practicing their guitar and learning Hootie and the Blowfish songs. You know, it's like it's two different worlds, and it shouldn't be. And maybe, you know, in terms of college, that should be exactly the place that those things are rectified, maybe. And maybe they are to some extent, but they should be more so. First thing that comes to mind for me is this comes top of my mind because it was asked of me a while back, and I remember thinking it was really prevalent. But there's, just as a woman in the music industry, when I was really young and I was a tour manager, you know, you kind of rock up in your cowboy shirt and jeans and trainers, and people would, you know, you go into a venue in Scranton, Pennsylvania, off the tour bus, and people are like, "Where's the tour manager?" And I'd be like, "That's me, I'm the tour manager." And over time, you sort of develop this swagger, you know. But I was always very conscious of remaining true to myself and not becoming somebody who had to enter into that egotistical world. So I found it really really enjoyable to sort of challenge myself to be respected and well liked by the end of the day, without being a dick, you know. And so I think that's something, you know, like the music world particularly, and I'm sure the arts world as well, can be a little bit toxic and a little bit competitive. And if you can become personable whilst being true to yourself and being kind and open, and managing to kind of stick your chest out and be strong without being a dick, I think that's a really important skill, and that for me is the most important skill that I've had in my career thus far, is learning how to manage those things, because it can be tricky, because you do come up against it sometimes, and you do get treated like a silly little girl sometimes, and it's about coming away with your head held high in those situations, which is a very important skill. Other skills that are most important. I mean, for me, it's really about people management as well. You know, managing and being able to organize yourself in a way that you can manage people and manage yourself. You know, as in it can be tricky, particularly as a tour manager or an agent or a manager, that you tend to get a lot, you know, there can be a sort of a mammying to it sometimes, not so much anymore, but as I was growing up, I felt that in that world that people could tend to that, and you have to decide whether or not you want to be involved in that sort of relationship, or if, you know, like how you want to deal with people. So people managing and managing yourself and protecting yourself and not giving too much of yourself, you know, finding out the balance between being nice and not being taken for a fool, is important. I think they're kind of the most important two. I probably need more time to come up with the third without rambling.
This has been the Zoom In Sessions. This has been Úna Molloy. Una, if people want to find out more about what you do, your work, what's your website, what's your social media handles?
allturningpirate.com, @turningpirate, all turning pirate, never actually becoming a full pirate.
Yeah, and give us the Lost Lane as well if people want to see some work.
Lost Lane is at Lost Lane Dublin for all the socials, and lostlane.ie for all the listings and exciting goings on there.
Brilliant.